This is a Q Media production.
Leading and navigating change across a business can be overwhelming. So many leaders are handed a project by their board or CEO, and suddenly they're expected to create the vision, inspire their team, navigate roadblocks, and make some really hard decisions. It can feel like you're swimming in the ocean at night, not knowing which way to go. So how is a leader supposed to know how to drive change? The challenge is, there's no course or dummy's guide to leading change. Until now. This is your crash course in leading change, and I'm your guide, Lauren Ryder. In this podcast, you'll learn from top C-suite and executive leaders who've driven impactful change across their organizations. No matter what project you're leading, maybe it's a sales transformation or a restructure or a digital transformation, either way, the approach to leading change is the same. It all starts with an inspirational leader, and that's you. Today, I'm chatting with Peter Auhl, an award-winning, innovative CIO who has made tangible impact on the Adelaide community through using cutting-edge technology. He's a country boy at heart, but always thinking about the future and about how technology can solve real problems for both businesses and people. His approach to driving change is to keep people at the heart of every step, all the way from project inception to community engagement. We also chat through the importance of quality data management, strong leadership, and managing teams. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode of Leading Change. Pete, great to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
So you have come all the way from Adelaide.
I have.
So Adelaide is known for churches, great wine, some fun festivals, but it's certainly not known as a technology-led smart city. So tell me, you used to be the CIO of the city of Adelaide. Tell me a little bit how the background and how has this become this technology city?
Yeah, look, really good question. And Adelaide is known for all of those things, amongst others. Very culturally rich city, beautiful food and wine, lovely spots to visit. Everyone should come to Adelaide. It's a lovely spot to see. I was fortunate enough to work with the city of Adelaide for a number of years. And a particular focus around human-centred design and really looking at ways that we could apply technology to solve real-life human issues. But my background very much started, I'm a country boy. I was born in the southeast of South Australia, a place called Narracourt. I grew up on a large farm, and we didn't have everything at our fingertips. And I think I've brought that through my career. So I see myself as very much a problem solver rather than just looking at how I actually put together technology. So Adelaide's experience was very much driven from a people perspective. So all of the projects we worked on through Adelaide were very much driven from a need and a problem and making sure we actually always look back to how we actually resolve that problem.
So I might just jump back and talk a little bit about you for a second. I mean, you've got some serious accolades. In 2019, you were the Digital Innovator of the Year. 2017, the Chief Information Officer of the Year. And in 2016, finished in the top 5 of Asia Pac's top 5 CIOs, and even got some acknowledgement from Steve Wozniak and Sir Richard Branson. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's very humbling, and thank you for reminding me of those things. But look, I'm just a humble boy from the country. Unfortunately, my mum passed away when I was quite young. I was only 12. She was only 37. And her dream would have been for me to be a wool classer. So, someone that threw the wool fleece out on the table in a shearing shed. And if she could only see me now, it's an incredibly huge honour to get accolades from some of my heroes like Branson and Wozniak, which was absolutely amazing. But I think it really stems back to my authenticity. So it's not about ego. This was very much about solving problems and making sure that everything I did throughout my career was really about how we can make a difference.
So really makes you quite a different CIO than most CIOs who are out there. So you got brought on it was the 10 gigabit project in Adelaide. How on earth did that one start, and what did it really enable for the city?
Yeah, so look, I was brought on to the city of Adelaide to look at ways that Adelaide could better serve the community of Adelaide and more broadly South Australia. And the council had pulled together a strategic plan at its heart was around growth. So how do we actually put Adelaide on the map? As you mentioned before, Adelaide's known for a few things, but not really an economic hub All right, so everything that we're focused on is really focused on growth. How do we actually get growth happening within the city? So I spent a lot of time on the streets of Adelaide speaking to businesses, walking around the streets, talking to companies, finding out what was going on. And one of the common threads that were coming through, and this is where the Tengi story came from, was businesses could see when kids were getting home from school because their productivity would drop. Okay, so when kids get home from school, what do? They do their homework? No, they don't. They jump on Netflix or YouTube or whatever. And so these businesses were in competition over domestic internet links to get to their cloud service. So as they were in competition at that time of the day, their productivity would drop. All right, so I went home one weekend, sat in my office and went, my background is actually telecommunications. So I sat down with a whiteboard and texters and started to draw this concept up, which had not been done before, but really looking at internet as a service on top of a network rather than internet as the network. All right, so the whole concept around 10 Gig Adelaide was about how we could get businesses off the internet and onto private links that are either connected to the cloud or connected to each other without touching the internet, which again was going to resolve that problem. So after that elongated consultation process, we put together this plan to actually deliver this project that had never been done before, which was really tricky. So when you're actually trying to ask political leaders to support a project that's never been done before was really, really challenging.
How did you do that?
It comes back to really focusing in on making sure the problem was there to solve. So, when the politicians went back to their constituents and said, what does this look like? They said, we actually need this, absolutely need this. And ironically, when it took 3 years, this is not a small project, it's a multi-generational infrastructure, and it is something that is just still, it's in the ground now, but it's still only sort of the tip of the iceberg. So making sure that we always knew that project was going to be win the hearts and minds of the business community. So when we launched the project, we had this goal to actually sell or to connect 1,000 buildings, 3,500 businesses across the city. We gave ourselves 6 months to achieve that. It was sold out in 6 weeks.
Wow.
So, and on the back of that, there were a number of buildings throughout the city who had been left idle for a number of years, like boarded up, big businesses, big buildings. And institutional investors actually bought up a bunch of that stock overnight once the council had actually signed off on the project. So it was a problem to solve, and because the community wanted it, it was amazing. We had a launch event in the town hall. I'm a bit of an introvert, not. I got a DJ. We had this beautiful lighting, almost like what Vivid is here. All these, like the pipe organ and stuff like that, and it was just packed full of people. So it was fantastic. But it was really about a project that was given back to the community for them to champion its way through.
Hey guys, I've had a lot of people asking me questions about leadership, high-performing teams, and business trends. So I've created the Leading Edge Brief, which is like having a cup of coffee with me in your email. Sign up today on our website, leading-edge.global. It's the best way to stay connected and keep up with any upcoming events, updates, and all the good stuff. Now back to the podcast. Now, a fibre link is great for those businesses, but to me, I see that as more of an enabler, right? So we've got a whole bunch of really fast fibre. What are we going to actually do with it? How can we bring more value? What did you do next once the fibre was laid?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that were part of the project. One is the city itself had some issues around the traffic management system that was actually through the city. We also had Australia's first free Wi-Fi network. So all of these things were coming to not end of life, but needed to be re-energised. So having this fibre infrastructure through the ground that was going to create this economic opportunity. So we had the likes of Technicolor and those sorts of companies coming in, Sony, coming in and say, we want to be a part of this, Boeing, those sorts of companies that were really interested in what we were doing. But at the heart of it, it was also solving some problems for the city itself. So part of the deal, it was a PPP with a telecommunications company, so a public-private partnership. So we also negotiated at no cost, fibre to be taken to every single traffic signal through the city. And so that fibre was actually dragged to each of the traffic signalling systems, and we put a switch on each of those. So it gave us capacity to do different things. So it wasn't just solving the economic issue, it was actually multi-dimensional in the way that it was actually going to solve other problems as well, which is really exciting.
It reminds me of the Tesla, which is built for future. So they keep on adding on new features without actually having to change the hardware.
Correct. And as you would know, fibre is infinitely scalable, and it is physical. So there's no problems around things like spectrum and stuff like that. It can't get saturated. So this is effectively, a private fibre network throughout an entire city, and thinking about some of the use cases that were coming out of it, like, a medical imaging company sending real-time files to the hospital in real time across the city without touching the internet, those types of things. Or you could start to think about how could you bring together through the city a cohort of people, maybe it's a legal fraternity, so have a secure network within the city that's not touching the internet, so people can share files through the city. So like a lot of things that are innovative and different, it did a few things. It solved some problems immediately, like the traffic signalling system, like the free Wi-Fi network, but also enabled people to innovate. So, and again, this is still the tip of the iceberg, like looking at ways that, this network can be fully utilised in different ways. I'm just starting to do some work for the Bragg Cancer a centre that's opening up in Adelaide. It's doing proton therapy for cancer research and cancer treatment. And I'm really excited about what the product like 10 Gig Adelaide can do for a research centre like that. So there's lots of different things that it can actually achieve, which is amazing.
So what were some of the projects that came out the back of it, some initiatives that really kind of started to impact the businesses and the people within Adelaide?
Yeah, look, it was also the bedrock for a lot of Adelaide's Smart City program itself. So as you would know, Smart City IoT devices need to be connected to a network. We had this sort of omnipresent network through the city, so it gave us capacity to actually plug into that. So we worked really closely with companies like Cisco and others, to look at things like smart lighting through the city, but it was very much focused on, again, experience. So it wasn't about let's put in smart lighting. It was about how can we, Council also had an ambition about being carbon neutral and being sustainable. So how could we dim the lights time in the evening to a safe level, and then when someone walked past, it actually illuminated fully? So those sorts of things at the back of this technology enabled us to have, I guess, a consistent plane of connectivity, which was really critical in making sure we get that consistency in service. Things like car parking, we did a bunch of research around why people weren't spending more money in the CBD. The biggest issue was car parking. If I go to a Westfield out in a suburb, I can go to Westfield, go straight into a car park normally and go in and buy my stuff. If I come to the city, it's a lot harder. So we looked at ways that we could put in sensors, not from a compliance perspective, but more from an experience perspective. So, driving into the city, knowing where the car parking is on the street, knowing where it isn't, being able to transact through an app, being able to get a reminder when it's about to expire and extend for a little while if you need to, things like that are really important. But also really interesting projects around I guess, health issues as well. So we had a bunch of environmental sensors spread through the city. And I was really passionate about the idea, could we create data sets that looked at microclimates through the city? So, if my child had asthma, could I actually get a pollen count in particular parts of the city? And if I was taking my child into the city on the weekends, I could keep away from those spaces. So again, looking at ways that we could develop use cases on the back of this omnipresent and consistent and reliable connectivity across the city, and then making that into real life applications for people to make their life better.
So it sounds like you had a lot of use cases. It sounds like you're quite creative, and I'm guessing you had a creative team with you, and I'm sure you had lots of different ideas of what to approach next. Did you have some sort of a structure or prioritization plan? Because I'm guessing budget wasn't endless. How did you decide which ones to do next?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lauren. It's so important to go through a really robust process, and actually, in my business that I'm working on now, that's a lot of the work that we do with others. It's really about taking steps through a process to ensure that you're actually resolving problems. So before we did anything, and a number of the projects didn't go ahead. Like there's lots of projects that we looked at and we did some due diligence and we went, it's a cute project, but it's probably not worth it. It's probably not ready now. Things like, you would have heard of digital twins now. 7 years ago, we started to look at digital twins as a concept before its time, and we went, it's probably not quite ready. But going through that diligent process of looking at and speaking to customers, I spent a lot of time in the access and inclusion panel, to talk to people with impairments to say, is this going to make a difference to you? Ironically, I just bought something off a guy in Adelaide recently, and he goes, I know you. And I said, where do you know me from? He goes, you led this conversation with community people about what you were doing in Adelaide. And I remembered it. I brought in some people that were business owners in the city, a couple of tourists that didn't speak English, some people who needed a wheelchair to move around the city, and sat them down and had a conversation with them. So making sure every step of the way, we're always checking in with humans, people that are actually going to consume these services to make sure they're hitting the mark. And that was a really good sense check to go, this is not just a crazy idea, this is a really good idea. And you would have heard me talk yesterday at the conference. I've always been a big supporter of my team, me getting out of the way, me taking the whacks, all right, and making sure my team can get on with stuff. So giving them and empowering them to do stuff as well. And I find, a quality leader really knows how to pull together a really good team, but also how to empower the team and also let them get on with stuff as well. So it's a melting pot of all those things.
Yeah, it sounds like sort of your view on leadership. I mean, you're saying empower and let them go, but if somebody's remembered you from years ago, you're obviously standing there flying the flag, driving it. So, tell me a bit more about your view on leadership and how you actually know when to stand forward and to share that vision or when to step back.
Yeah, look, culture is such an important part of who I am. I'm a huge believer in building a really effective and productive culture, and I guess it's walking the talk and bringing people into the fold. So I've got a rule as a leader, like spend 90% of your time on people doing the right thing, not the wrong thing. And that changes the way the culture actually drives itself as well. So a lot of times, particularly in government, people spend an awful lot of time with people that aren't doing the right thing. So they're the people that are actually the squeaky wheels. I did the reverse. So, if someone was smashing it, they get an hour of my time. Unfortunately, I had a massive open door policy. Anyone can come speak to me anytime they want about anything, and they did, which is lovely. But I'm an empath, and as soon as they start telling me stuff, you own it, own a part of it. So each person has a part of you, which is really hard. So you spend a lot of time after hours actually doing your work, so that you can actually be that sort of authentic person in front of people as well. So I think it's that, lots of stories around, getting staff involved in these community-facing things, getting kids in from high schools. We had a whole day that we brought in kids, whole group of kids from high school, took them through a data center, taught them some real life stuff that they were sort of getting the theory from school, but they'd actually seen it, got the mayor to speak to them, the CEO, stuff like that, but getting my team sort of wrapped around that as well. Doing processes like we had this process called walk in your shoes, which you may have heard about yesterday as well, which is something that I do now as a consultant. And we just did one recently, which was excellent. But what we do is we give people cards, surprise them with cards, team them up, go and find a park with a basketball ring because your kid likes playing basketball. Go and try and, report this piece of graffiti on this asset. Go and, find out where the best piece of Indigenous art is in the community and stuff like that. So that sort of deep empathy. I think I gave an example yesterday. We actually made one team go and get a busking license, and then we sent them to the local mall with a drum and a guitar, and we made them busk for half an hour, which was amazing, and took photos, and they got to experience what it's like to be a busker. So I think that's a really important part of making sure people can feel that empathy when they're actually delivering a service.
So, we talk. You're kind of talking about services that became available due to all of the smart city and the new applications. And it sounds like, City of Adelaide was very forward thinking in that regard. But how did you get the constituents, the people who are living in Adelaide, to actually adopt this technology?
Part of it is about that process, making sure that they're aware of what the value is for them. Part of it is making sure you're always checking in with people like the Access and Inclusion panel. But it's also making sure that, over time you're actually checking in as well over time as well. And I think there's a huge opportunity, and I'm not saying that this is something that we did exceptionally well in Adelaide, but I think there's a gap almost at the moment around community change process. It's something I'm working on at the moment as a bit of a side hustle, and looking at ways that particularly with technology, how you can use a similar process you would use inside the organisation from a change perspective, but do it through a community lens. So using some of the tools that you would use from a change management perspective, as you would know very, very closely, Lauren, and taking those learnings and taking them into a community sort of aspect as well.
So what are some of those common themes that you're finding that you think are really going to work?
Oh, I think people want government to get out of the way. I think that's at the heart of a lot of the conversations I've heard, that they're really keen for government only, like a good game of football or any sport, the umpire's only there to blow the whistle when it's absolutely needed. And I think the community is really looking for government to show that sort of leadership now. We just want to get on with our stuff. We want to self-consume. When I was in the Department of Transport, I had to spend a lot of time looking at ways that we could sell things like an easy reg application, for example. And, most people want to transact in those sorts of ways now. They don't. And that was 8 or 9 years ago. So back then it was like, no, people want to go to a counter. It's like people can still go to a counter. It's about choice. But if I don't want to go to a counter and I want to do it, from my bed at night or, in the morning while I'm having my breakfast, I should be able to do that as well. So it will always come back to choice for me.
It sounds like all of these applications that you're mentioning, they sound like they would be creating massive amounts of data, right? Am I also guessing that a city council isn't going to have data scientists running around to be able to process this? How did you manage that?
Well, we actually did have a data scientist on my team, and we had a very large practice around data. I don't like the terms data lakes and big data and those sorts of things. I like synthesized data. It's like musicians, it's pointless just having a bunch of instruments playing stuff. You need a conductor, you need someone that's actually pulling the notes together so it sounds like music. And I think that's really important when you're looking at data. So again, working backwards from what's the problem you're trying to solve and what are the data sets that are needed that are going to give the biggest impact to resolve that issue. I have a litmus test. Whenever I go into an organisation, I go look for how many Excel spreadsheets there are, how many access databases there are, because it's telling you that the organisation's hungry for information. They can't find it, so they're starting to build their own tools around it. And it would be absolutely eye-watering. I won't say which organisation it was, but the biggest was 600,000 spreadsheets in an organisation. Okay, so that was the largest, and that was a PB for me. It was a big number, but it gave me a sense, that it wasn't about data. It was about people just trying to find that insight inside of data. And one of the projects we worked on in Adelaide was a open insights platform. So rather than publish, and we did publish open data so people could use it, but we also recognised that a small company or a small business doesn't have a data scientist. They don't have a data team. They don't have an insights team, or people can build BI. So we started to build the tools for them. All right, so they could go through and just click buttons and the data would manipulate. And that's a live system that's on the City of Adelaide's website now. But again, coming back to your question, that's really important to make sure it's not just about data, it's about how you get value.
When you're running these projects, everyone wants to talk about they were great and they were shiny and they were amazing and they delivered everything. But my guess is you probably had a few roadblocks on the way. So can you think of any really big ones that you came a few clearly and how you got through them? What were some of your lessons learned?
God. Honestly, there are so many, and I think as a leader that's innovating, particularly in government, you've got to learn to dust yourself off and get back up and be resilient. And you've got to, again, anchor yourself back to you're actually resolving a problem. A lot of the issues that came up were often of a political nature, which is obviously challenging. But having really strong relationships with the political leaders and making sure that they could see the value and bringing them along for the ride as well was really important. So with everything, it's the squeaky wheels that sometimes talk the loudest. So also recognising that. And to be honest, sometimes, frankly, going back to data sets to actually show this is not the masses. This is just a small cohort of people that are not approving of this particular project. Let's have a think about that differently. So there were a lot of challenges, but I would say that rather than focusing on the challenges, I think, as a leader, the most important thing is to keep going, particularly in government. If there's a small door to walk through and get out, people want to take it.
Yeah.
All right, people want to take it. And someone taught me that a while ago. And you've got to see when that door's coming, all right, and you've got to shut it before they get there. So that's really important as well. Because they love to go, oh, we almost got there, but not quite.
Yeah, that's a great analogy then. So we all want to nail our strategy, right? But here's the thing I've picked up from working with growing companies. Their leaders aren't always singing the same tune. Processes are not built to win, and there's a few key people who could use some skill boosting. The reality is, to make this happen, you've got to get 3 things in sync: people, processes, and systems. Now here's a smart move to keep that growth growing strong. Dive into our transformation and change programs, or a professional development program for your people. Our team have worked with some of the world's biggest businesses, giving them clear ways of working, upskilling their leaders, and taking all their headaches away from wondering if they're doing it right. We only have limited spots each year, so inquire at our site, www.leading-edge.global, and mention you heard it from this podcast. Sounds to me like there's kind of a pull. We've got the strategy where we're looking to go, we've got the digital, the technology, but we've also got culture. We've got these 3 pieces that are kind of, I suppose, pulling at each other. How do you see all those working together? Yeah,
you obviously saw my Venn diagram yesterday. I guess it's a learning from being this long in this industry. Often you'll see people focusing on digital or technology and strategy. They'll try and pull those 2 things together. So the organisation will have a strategy and they'll have a really good digital plan to align with that. Or they'll be looking at their strategy and how the organisational culture is going, which is incredibly important as well, obviously. But I'm a big believer that those 3 things need to be looked in unison. So the idea that we've got, let's say our strategy is to be the best service delivery organisation in the world, and we've got this amazing digital tool that's giving frontline staff all this information. They can make decisions on their own. They're empowered to make decisions on their own, but the culture isn't there. Like the manager's saying, no, you can't make that decision. You've got to come through me. So there needs to be that adjustment there. Or vice versa. Maybe the culture's there. They go like, it's Virgin Airlines. Everyone's, hoo-ha. But the technology is not there to support them to make their own decision as well. So I think those 3 things really need to, organisations need to think through those 3 things in unison. And that's at the heart of everything that I do now. So really looking at those 3 things in unison. So if you see a deficiency in one, let's just say the culture, what's your approach to actually lift that? Yeah, look, it's certainly not an area of expertise for me. It's an area I'm very passionate about. So this is more about working with like-minded organisations who share those values, making sure that when we can identify that there is shortfalls in a particular area, we are attuned enough to know that we need to bring someone else in to actually help with that. So, getting things like organisational pulse surveys and stuff like that to really get a sense of what's going on through the organisation. I'm a big believer in psychometric profiling and stuff like that. So starting to read the tea leaves, for lack of a better word, about what's happening, you can sort of sense it pretty quickly. And then having that, honest conversation at an executive level to go, look, I don't think it's worth pursuing this digital project until these things start to catch up together. And that's really important as well. You mentioned before that you're a proponent of design thinking and co-creation. And can you walk us through an example of something that you've delivered and how you actually led that process and what the benefits were? Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've done guest lecturing at universities on design thinking and human-centered design. And I think that's a really important part as well as a leader. Like if you're a public leader, you've got to get in at the ground floor as well and talk to people about the importance of, doing these things and alike. We've done a lot of, short sprint type projects where we've brought together groups of people, stakeholders, like in a room like this, We might have, a UX designer, a dev that can do a sense check if something's going to work or not, a couple of SMEs from the business, subject matter experts from the business, and, giving them a really tight time frame and getting them to iterate. So drawing stuff, before the technology comes out, before any code's written. And there's a really good project that we worked on. It was a HR system project around data and analytics. And we did exactly that, so we gave them 4 weeks to actually build the products. But the first 2.5 weeks, all they did is draw on butcher's paper and hang it all up everywhere, got the CEOs in, got the owners of, the product in, and they got to stick their Post-it notes on and circle things. And the developer was going, oh, that's possible, but that's not, so we're sense checking it as we're going through. So when we get at the back of it, and the beauty of this was the stuff that they drew, because we had a developer in the room as well, was almost identical to what they actually got. All right. So it wasn't like when the product was finally delivered, it was something completely different. They went, oh my God, my expectations aren't met at all. It was like, I can visualize it on paper, colored textures and everything. And then when it was actually delivered, it looked almost identical. So tools like that are really, really important, I think.
I think it's so important to get all of your stakeholders in a room so early, because if you don't, what you do is you design a product that might not be great for them, and then you get resistance out the back because I said it's not for them. So I'm guessing that at this stage, your resistance to, during the project was quite low. Did you run into any issues, or what if we don't have resistance, what are the types of issues you might find?
Yeah, and look, broadly in all of the organisations I work in, there is often an undercurrent of people that just don't want change, and that's you've just got to accept that they're going to be there. So, I'm a sort of an epic fan of Simon Sinek and Tipping Point and the Why and all of that stuff. So, I've always encouraged my team to look at things like tipping points. So once you hit 18% of the organisation who are adopting, there's almost this. You would have seen the first follower video at some stage, no doubt. Getting to that point where people can start to see the value, and then all of a sudden everyone wants to be involved, and then there's a few people left behind at the back that come on board eventually.
Yeah.
So,
or they leave.
Or they leave. I wouldn't. There's always going to be resistance. I think again, as being a good leader, is recognizing that there are going to be resistance. It's hard work. It's not easy. It's hard work. And if you're an empath and you're emotionally intelligent, you're carrying a lot of that stuff through projects as well. But you need to pony up and get on with it, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle because they've got their normal BAU role that they're working on, and then we're asking them to, take on these changes and learn some new things and do things differently, and that balance is really tough. How did you manage that?
Yeah, it is, and look, I empathise with people around that as well, because every project that comes on, everyone's going, oh, here we go again, there's something new coming. But, we did a lot of things around change heat mapping, making sure that we knew where the pockets through the organisation were going to have the most challenges. We were really careful about looking at the schedule. So if we're going to, going to go into the finance department, for example, you wouldn't be going in and doing change during the end of the financial year, or mid-year reviews or anything like that. So making sure we had a really good understanding of not just where there was going to be the biggest impact from a change perspective, but also their schedules and what was going on for them.
Absolutely. Now, when you were rolling out change, sounds like all the tools that you've just mentioned, sounds like you had a change manager on board. How did your leaders take the change? Did you enable them to be able to take that out, or did you leave that onto the change manager to...
No, we had a hybrid model where we had change leads. We also had business partner model as well, which is very much the relationship. So the relationship strategically was managed by a business partner. So every organisational group, and all the organisations I've worked in, I've always had a business partner, and that would be a consistent face and voice for them to go to with anything strategic. So partnering that up with the change process was really important. So the change people weren't just these new faces in, it was a person that was buddied in with the business partner, and I think that's really, really important. So it was always project-based, it was always team-based, so it wasn't individuals, it was always a service as part of a project that was delivered through a group of people. So it might have been the project manager, the business partner, and the change person coming in together and having that conversation. Really good governance process is really important as well. So we called it a business systems committee, and I've had those in most organisations we've worked in, which is effectively all of the managers and directors and people across the organisation that are making decisions about what's going on. It's their product ultimately.
Yeah.
All right. So, I chaired it for a small period of time, and then I handed over to one of my other peers to chair these meetings. And it was amazing. I think one of my most exciting times was actually watching someone give up one of their own projects for someone else because they knew the impact was bigger to our customer base. So, getting all those artifacts together, making sure that there's tactical stuff around change management and those relationships, but also having that strategic governing lens. And I'm talking about effective governance, opportunity-led governance, not just risk-based governance. Yeah. It's often, I find it fascinating that organisations have a risk committee or audit and risk committee. They have an opportunities committee. Yeah. So even just that nuance, like let's start thinking about how do we, create opportunities and manage the risk of the opportunity rather than let's focus just on risks.
I like that. Now, you have actually started a new venture, and I'd really like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. So again, it's born out of a problem, born out of actually a personal frustration, being an executive in government for a number of years and seeing, how challenging it is as ideas come through the organisation up to the executive to make decisions about what they're doing. Okay, and often it's very difficult for people at the lower levels to actually make some of these really hard decisions because you're going to have to cut projects out. You might have, a $500 million budget, but you've got $700 million worth of projects. So who's going to make those decisions? If it's my project, it's really hard. So, and it always ends up at the executive, and it's very, very challenging. It's intense, and the information that you get is very, very piecemeal. So we've invented a product called Bindah. It's Tinder for the budget process. It was actually a working name, but it's stuck. So Bindah is how it's spelt. But effectively, it's gamifying that process. So anything from an idea. So picking up the ideas box, it might just be you may be my manager. I've got an idea. We have a chat about it. Okay. And you go, that's a great idea, Pete. We've got budget to do it. Let's just get on with it. Right up to, this is a great idea like 10 gig Adelaide. This needs a full business case. All of the information is transparent. It goes through an iterative process, and then it transitions into a full business case template. And then ultimately it flips around. The executive can vote on it. They can choose which ones they like best, but it pushes decision-making down into the organisation, which is really important. And then the whole thing flips around, turns into a map and shows the community where the projects are and where things are being spent. And our ultimate goal is eventually to actually start to push that first part of it, out to the community. So the idea of a digital town hall effectively, where you're actually saying, well, let's get the community's feedback on what they want. All right, before we even start the process, let's start thinking about what they want. So if they need a skate park or they need a playground or a toilet block or something like that, we want to hear from them first rather than, hey, we've got to the end of this process. Let's have a look at what you think now. So that's the ultimate goal. But really exciting project. Unfortunate name, but it's stuck. So it's there forever now. So, but it's really good fun. So from idea to implementation and everything in between, it's really about creating transparency in process, driving cultural reform, driving innovation, and capturing everything along the way.
Does it need somebody on site or a consultant to come in and kind of help them through the process, or is it really just council gets it, they implement it, and off they go?
Yeah, and we've been very deliberate around its price point as well. It's going to be affordable for everyone, but it's very much self-serve. It's very robust. It's a web platform with a companion app at the front of it. And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. You can take a photo of the asset, here it links to the strategic priority of the organisation, here's some high-level financials, here its change impact, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, really exciting. So we're really looking forward to it. And we definitely want it to be a product that we just hand over to organisations, not just councils.
I was going to say, because it actually sounds like any organisation could really benefit from this.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest from utilities. We've had a lot of interest internationally already. So it's solving a problem, and there's nothing really in the market at the moment that deals with it. So, but it's come out of a problem, my own personal frustration. Back to the beginning of the conversation, we've got to resolve problems when we're looking at ways that we deliver projects, and Bindah is certainly one of those things that I think is going to resolve a lot of problems.
So if someone wants to find Bindah online, where do they go?
They go to bindah.au.
Fantastic. Pete, it has been an absolute pleasure.
God, it's so good. It's so good to see you.
You too. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a great day.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see you next time.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.